Okay, it's time.
It is time. Go for it.
Oh, I get
Oh,
to-
yeah. You do the thing. I'll try.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to JMAP and in a little while extra. Um, happy to see so many people in person here. So as is usual, we're going to start with the Note Well slide. I'm hoping that all of you are very familiar with this, but I will continue to narrate a little bit about it. Anyway, it's of course important that we make sure that everybody's on the same page with respect to things like intellectual property rights and definitely with the code of conduct as well. And so if you have not read this in detail already many times, I would encourage you to do it again. Next slide.
And if you have on your board, feel free.
So we're going to start with updates on, oh, well, this is the very top level agenda, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're going to start with, on the JMAP side, we're going to cover a couple of drafts that are in last call or otherwise submitted to IESG. And then we have about a half a dozen different discussions about various JMAP drafts on calendars, contacts, quotas, sharing and tasks, and sender and SMIME sender extensions.
Maybe.
Maybe.
There'll be a couple of these that
You can't skip.
please hop straight up and talk if you'd like to.
Is this the time for agenda bashing?
Yeah.
Ah, just want to say that the migration data portability is not on the agenda right now.
It's on the copy of the agenda and not on my slides because I didn't put it in. Apologies, it will happen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And then, I don't know, are we bashing the agenda for extra as well at this point?
Sure, we can bash the agenda for extra. Here's the agenda for extra.
There's the agenda for extra, which I am less familiar with, not being.
Yeah, I think the only bashing we had for this is that Civ Snooze and Civ Process IMAP are basically have had no progress since last IETF, but maybe Process IMAP was supposed to go to last call. So we'll deal with that when we get there.
Speak closer to the microphone.
Sure. Yeah, so we think that Civ Process IMAP was probably supposed to go to last call and can't remember what happened with that, but we have had no progress on either of them since last meeting. So we will glance through the state of them when we get there.
Okay. Did you catch the agenda bash for the minutes, or I wasn't doing minutes?
Yes,
at the time.
I'm catching
You'll
up.
catch. Okay, thanks. I hadn't realized that went by quickly.
We're doing this double act very well, aren't we? Should we get straight into the first item on the agenda, which is Blob? I don't have any slides for Blob. I had one review from Sector, which I have replied to, and I've submitted a new version with the fixes from that. I don't think there's anything else to say unless our area director has any comments on.
No.
Excellent.
I'm just getting set up, and I want to. If I say no now, I might come back to it in a couple of minutes. But
Cool.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Excellent. Next item here is the Civ, which has been Alexi, please.
Yeah, so Murray had some AD review comments which were on blocking. I'm sorry I didn't get to them, but I will. They didn't seem particularly controversial, I think. So.
Okay, so yep, we're up to Civ now.
Yes, Civ action registration.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
No.
We're doing great here.
Okay, rewind. Braun is responsible for Blob. I'm responsible for Civ actions.
Yeah, okay, so
With Ken.
that hasn't come to me yet. Okay.
Really? Because
You sent comment, AD review, and you started last call, so.
No, Sid is in working group last call.
Yep.
Lotus is in last call.
This is kind of, I think Alexi's getting ahead of himself. I think Civ Action Registry is part of the extra session. This is the JMAP.
Never mind.
This is JMAP for Civ.
Oh, I'm stealing your document. I'm sorry.
Ken,
Yeah, so I don't know if people noticed there was an email to the list. Someone had requested 2 other items in there, which I think were probably better off as extensions. I forget off the top of my head what they were. Oh, one of them, they wanted ability to recall failed action, why an action had failed through this protocol. I think it's probably too far along to add that now. It seems right for an extension if somebody wants that. The only other issue that was brought up that might want to be discussed here, currently to deactivate a script, you basically use the activate script with an empty string. The request was to have a second, another property which specifically disables a script as opposed to using enable with an empty string, which follows what managed Civ did. I have no strong opinion either way. I'll leave it up to the group to decide if we want to add that at this point or just leave it as is. It's functionally equivalent. It's just a separate property.
anybody want to comment on this? Queue is open. Alexi. Yeah, push the button. If you don't follow the process, we won't know who's talking.
Okay, so now I'm with you on the right save document. Yeah, about the activation, that was a bit of a bike shed, I think, but I'm kind of, I don't really care, you know, just tell me what the meaning of empty string is or what's how to deactivate. So I don't mind.
Yeah, the spec, as I wrote it, was following the model outlined by Managed Civ, for better or for worse. And this model is exactly what that does. Again, if people feel strongly about having another property, I'm willing to do it. But at this late in the game, if there aren't strong opinions, I'm inclined just to leave it as is.
Neil.
Hello.
Hello.
So, first of all, it shouldn't accept empty string. The spec actually says or null. It's ID or null. And an empty string is not an ID and it is not null. So that should be an invalid arguments error if you send that. The advantage to having a separate property I could see would be if you don't want it to change, you don't have to omit the whole thing. You can always submit every argument, which I could see being potentially a thing for strictly typed languages in particular. It might be awkward to have to omit something rather than provide a default. But other than that, I don't feel too strongly either way. But I would say, yeah, it's definitely null rather than empty string if you're keeping with the current system.
Oops. I'm minutes at the bottom. Sorry, chair's just disorganized here. Go ahead. Yeah, so you're suggesting that we do add a separate property?
I could see the advantage of that for, yeah, not having to deal with this, yeah, like, you know, you can consider it like an argument to a method, and there's no value you can pass here that would not do something if it's with the current spec, which is perhaps slightly weird. You have to omit it. So I think probably I would lean towards adding a separate argument.
Ken? Happy?
Want to take them out? Whatever, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, you're the author. If you're happy to do it, then yep. That's Ken saying no big deal. He will do it. Excellent. I don't think we're going to need to do a new working group last call for this. It's a small change. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You were finishing it up.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, this is Hans-Jörg. I remember, Ken, that is quite some time ago. I think we had a very small exchange on a minor topic on this CIF4JMAP thing, and I just relooked it because it somehow went dormant a little bit. And it's related to what we discussed in Vienna about CIF in non-JMAP context with, how people build CIF rules together as a system from what they are coming, basically. And I think my concern with respect to CIF4JMAP was that it would be nice to actually have a mechanism to know which was the or is the underlying system which owns the CIF, so the server software. So I wonder if this is something that could go into a property here, or is that something I'm not quite sure that could be derived from the JMAP overall response. I'm not sure if there's somewhere a server metadata. I think that isn't right now, right? Yeah, so the background of the question is, the observation is that empirically in practice, CIF is very much structured by the use of the underlying software. So there is, for instance, certain webmailers that have a very clear structure of the CIF rules which they create. And it's helpful for a consuming client to know that. And typically when you use managed CIF directly, you have a greeting. So you know actually this is coming from a certain server implementation like a Zimbra or whatever kind of thing, and you can actually apply your changes. Sometimes you have it within the CIF script. But in case of JMAP, I think it might be the case that CIF4JMAP might be wrapping existing underlying SCIM servers.
Mm-hmm.
So that information somehow is currently not able to be retrieved, in my opinion. And it would be good to have maybe a mechanism for that.
Ideally, it would be the server header via HTTP, I guess, but
If this is important, we could add another property to the capability, which lists the implementation. But my guess is that some sites might want to suppress that and not leak what their implementation or version is. But I can certainly add it.
all right. Can I ask maybe that we discuss this on the list? Cool. Excellent. Then let's move on to calendar, which is the next item on the list. Neil, did you want to drive the slides? I think if you request slide control, you can just take them directly from the preloaded slides.
Where would I do that?
Top left-hand side, there's a share preloaded slides button.
Is there?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Clever. So I think this is hopefully going to be fairly brief, so we can move this along. I published version 9 draft about a month ago, which had a few updates in it. So probably the biggest one is we've had this big discussion over in Calix about adding schedule ID to JS calendar to participants, which identifies that participant kind of globally. This would often just be essentially a mail to URI with someone's email address or something like that, but basically separating out the ID of a participant from the methods of contacting them, which is in the send to property. And why this is important for JMAP calendars is we need to be able to look at an event and go, which of these participants is you, the logged in user? And before we were looking through all of the send to options and going, would I receive any of these? But this kind of simplifies that because we can now just look at the schedule ID and go, is this ID one of the user's schedule IDs? You may have multiple because you might have like different email addresses, the aliases, they're all you, but it's still comparing. You're not doing a nested loop kind of comparison. So it simplifies things a bit, I think. So that was the biggest change. We also added this is origin property. We discussed this at the last IETF meeting, which is just the server notifying, putting a property on the event to say it is the authoritative source for this event. So if you make changes, it's going to send out IETF messages to all the other participants and expect to receive RSVPs. As opposed to if that's false, then you've received this from someone else and you'll be sending out RSVPs back to them. Finally, the other kind of bigger change was removing this Sherry's act as property, which simplified the spec. We added this originally to give flexibility for kind of different modes of sharing, but when we looked around, it didn't seem that the two modes were not that different and didn't seem anyone actually needed both and from existing implementations, and removing complexity is, I think, a worthwhile thing. So we took that out. And then I added quite a few API examples. So with that, I believe that, if I'll move to the next slide, this is basically finished. I need to fix up some editorial stuff, including section references that are missing, and just say section XXX rather than properly linking, but do all that. And we're going to definitely need to wait to ensure the JS calendar schedule ID stuff is finalized, because we can't have, that's critical to how a lot of this works. So we can't have that changing underneath us if that doesn't end up doing what I think it's going to do. So hopefully though, we can publish this soon, probably with the JS calendar BIS, whenever that comes along. So I do encourage you to have a look if you want to make any further comments on it. Joris.
Hi, this is Joris Baum. Yeah, so I recently synced the JMAP tasks draft with your changes from calendar because there are a lot of commonalities.
Parallels.
Yeah. So one thing I stumbled upon is the calendar preferences object. For now, I refrained from tagging along here. So my take on this in JMAP mail, there's a role property, right? What a folder is supposed to be. Is it an inbox? Is it a draft? And for calendars, this also was there. They had the role property of a calendar folder. Was it? I think it was inbox only for now, right? Basically, to say this is the default folder of a user. And in the news version, you move this to a separate object. So I just wanted to understand the. So what I don't really like about this is that we now have two approaches. One is in mail. This is inside the folder object. It's a one property, and in calendars, this is a separate object.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know the reasoning behind that before I tag along here.
Sure. So I think we did discuss this at a previous IETF, but the big difference with the mail stuff is that that's immutable there, whereas this is something that can move around. And so the trouble is you're trying to enforce that at most one of the calendars is the default, because it doesn't really make sense if you had multiple. And so you get, I think, it's kind of easier to kind of enforce that with a single object where it's just there is no way of specifying multiple. So I think that's why we changed it, but that's my recollection. I don't know if Robert, you're in the queue, maybe you remember better. You go and then I'll come back to it. It's Robert.
Yeah, so regarding the ensured JS calendar work is finished part and the dependency now of JMAP calendars requiring schedule ID to be defined for JS calendar. So on Tuesday at Calex, we were setting the deadline for JS calendar BIS to summer next year. And so and this was done when we were under the assumption that there is no hard dependency of JMAP calendars on JS calendar BIS. but now I think there is, so we might want to revisit.
Yeah, I think we
This
agreed that we would just hold JMAP calendars until JS Calendar BIS publishes, but have it ready to go together.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then
So the
we will.
other question for you, Robert, yeah, was the role versus preferences.
Sorry, I was not completely following the discussion shortly because I looked at another thing. So what's the question there?
So it's about why we changed from having kind of a property for like is default, or actually we had role is inbox, but on the calendar object, to having the calendar preferences separate object that reference them.
Well, because we said we only want to have one default. One of the reasons was that it was more straightforward to us to have one property where this is defined rather than implementations requiring to look at all the roles of their calendars and make sure that their requirements are satisfied. I mean, we do already need to do that for JMAP mailbox, but other than that, I don't have a strong opinion on either. So if yeah.
Sounds like we'll have time if we want to reopen that on the mailing list. That's a smaller topic. Joris?
So one, Joris. So one crazy thing one could do is basically have both. You know, like it's the calendar preferences object is already defined as an extension to the core calendar spec. So the system could say, okay, I have this. I only implement the core capabilities, and I only have the role inside as a property inside the folder. Or it could say, oh, I also have this fancy calendar preferences object, and you don't need to go through all the calendar folders to find out what's the default. You just fetch the calendar preferences object. I don't have actually strong feelings regarding that. Just for our use case, it would be easier if it's inside the folder. For your use case, probably it's easier if it's a separate object. Yeah. It might make sense to take this to a list, yeah. But just an idea of mine. Or do you have any feedback on having both? Because it might be kind of weird as well.
I would definitely rather not have both, I think. I think one or the other. It's going to get confusing. People only look at one and not realize there's another one, or which will only work in some places, or something like that if it's in two different places. So I think one's better.
Yeah, I'm fine with taking it to a list. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Hans-Jörg. I didn't have the time to look it up directly in the spec, and I don't know it by heart. Maybe it's inside, but it sounded a little bit like what Robert said, like the default folder is the only role you have in mind here for calendars. Is it correct? That there's just one such role which you currently consider?
Yeah, I mean, we it's not called role anymore. It's default calendar. On the
I was just that's right. So point I would like to make is that there might also in calendars be other roles, like you have these kind of auto-generated birthday calendars, and there is I think 2 or 3 other examples. I would need to look that up. So probably that would speak more for role properties. Then if there's multiple ones, then having a fixed set of properties in the calendar preferences which you had to extend. I don't know. I need to look it up, but just want to make that point.
Auto-generated birthdays is something that's quite common. Fastmail has one as well. So
whether you need a role for it is another matter, but yeah, if you did, then
so the reason why that could be helpful to have that as a role calendar is because in some systems you're not permitted to interact with these calendars because they are just auto-generated.
Well, that would be exposed via the permissions you have. Like it could be exposed as a read-only calendar.
Yes, but what I mean it's a special purpose calendar. So that means the ACLs are part of it, but some systems also display them differently and so on and so on.
That's true.
So
I think if you're getting into that kind of thing, you might want to have multiple. That's the other thing there, of course.
Right.
Like, this is a birthday calendar and it's a synced from elsewhere calendar. I don't know. Like once you have greater than one, like different options, you kind of add.
I can check that how different systems do it. I can't, but I need to look it up.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Well,
So
that's what's
far I have
back.
for actions for this, we have role versus preference discussions to list. Any other actions for now for JMAP calendars, other than please review, which is the perennial topic? No? All right. We might as well just keep going with sharing, Neil, since you already have the slides up.
Great, sure. I mean, this has even less to say about it because it's basically, I did publish an update, but it was mainly kind of going through and doing copy edits. There was only one actual change, I think, which was adding this accounts property, which is to the principal object. And basically this was about, I realized if you were sharing information from calendars and mail and different things, they were all duplicating this whole account object inside them, which was getting messy and needless duplication. So kind of moved that up to top level property that the other ones could just reference the ID of. That's it. And I think this is a fairly much simpler spec in some ways. It was extracted out of calendars because we realized it was pretty generic across the different things you could do sharing with. I think that one's pretty ready, to be honest. But again, we probably want to publish it at the same time as JMAP calendars. We could publish it in advance, I guess, but yeah, I don't know if anyone has any other comments on this one.
Queue's open. Nobody looks particularly excited. Is there any reason, I guess, to hold it up? Ken? Oh, Hans-Jörg was first, actually. Yep. Go ahead, Ken.
This is Ken. My only question would be if this applies to JMAP email, then I say go ahead and publish it whenever it's ready. If it only applies to calendars and contacts, the emails will wait.
So it's a slightly abstract spec. It defines the things that are common, but you also have to say, I'm going to share this stuff, because you have to define some things. But it certainly could apply to mail, but that would actually be a separate spec in terms of letting you manage your mailbox sharing using this model. But yeah, I think it's definitely could be published actually, because it's not dependent on, it's the other way around. Calendars one is dependent on this one.
Then I'd suggest we probably should publish it first.
Sounds good. Okay. I'll look at fixing all the editorial stuff on that first.
All right. So first action is Neil to fix editorial. And then we go ahead and do a last call.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Can I ask you to take that one, Jim, when it's... Sure. Cool. Cool.
You mean Shepherd?
Yeah, do the working group last call and shepherd it when it's ready. Cool. Thank you. And with that, I think, thank you, Neil. That's your two topics, wasn't it? So JMAP for quotas is the next one in the list. According to this, Renee, if you want to pop in line. Hello.
Sure. Hello. Wait, turn off on my screen. Yeah. Hello,
Hey.
guys. This is Renee. So, I mean, about JMAP quota, actually, it's in last call as well. So it's going to be pretty quick. So yes, there is some minor typos to fix. Murray, thanks for reviewing it. I think I will push something before the end of the week. And then, yeah, we just saying as well, we started doing a first partial implementation of JMAP quota in James. So for now, just the quota get method. The rest will follow soon enough. If people want, I could show a little demo. I mean, that depends on you.
Sure, we've got time.
Sure. All right. To share my screen.
Yep, I'll just unslide and then go.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I just recorded a video to be sure to not have problems and make it fast, because we know how it goes, right, during demos. In real time. So yeah, just a user with his mailbox, so getting his quotas. He has no quotas for now defined. The list is empty. Doing a quota get. Checking with the just the web admin from the server side that there is no quota set up. Then we're gonna set a quota
Sorry,
for
René.
this user. Yes.
Can you probably zoom it in your application, because it's very hard to read here on the projection.
Oh, is it? I mean, I'm sharing my old screen. I don't know how it works.
Ah, okay, it's a video. I thought if it's a browser, you could have just...
I don't know. It's a video. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Watch this screen. It's clear. It's clearer on this one.
So yeah. Okay, I continue. So yeah, we just set up a quota for that user, and then we check through the server, the web admin that there is. Then yeah, we do a quota get through JMAP again, and so yeah, we see that we set up 2 quotas, one with count in the account and one with octet type on mail. And then I just like send quickly a mail to show that to myself to show that there is an update in the quota count and size. It's just quick. Up. Then yeah, checking again, and then we see that the counter increased. So yeah, that's pretty much it. No big deal. Yeah, thanks. And that's pretty much it for quota. So after I wanted to share something with identities, but I don't know if you want to wait at the end.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it now. Okay.
Yep.
Sure. So regarding JMAP identities, when our front-end team started implementing the identities with the mobile application, they ask us, yeah, we don't see anything to get a default identity to show if like the users have multiple identities. And after checking again the spec, realized that yes, actually there is nothing defined in JMAP for that. So we thought a little bit, and what we think is just adding a sort order field, like for the mailbox, for example, where I mean the lowest number would be your first identity, so it would be the default one to show, and then the higher it goes, and then you get the list of identity depending on the order. So I mean that would be the proposition we want to make. So I see some people have questions.
I actually didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to get in the queue, but yeah, we also had a look at that, and we also saw the same thing, that there are a lot of systems that have a default signature. So actually, we also came up with our own thing. I'm going to post it in the chat.
Oh, sure. Okay.
We have it's just it's not nothing IETF. It's just our own extension. We actually have identified signature name that's missing in the spec, and there's also some systems have a default for new signature, for reply signature, forward signature. Yeah, just wanted to say that there are additional properties missing as well for some systems.
Yeah. could maybe discuss that more on the list. I mean, we did as well have we do as well have a custom extension as well for that sort order field extra property.
I think
Next
Neil's
one.
you as well.
Yes, Neil.
Yeah, so just joining. I think sort order may not be the right way to do this, because if you have a sort order property, that would imply to me that you expect users to be able to manually order these things. I mean, maybe you can do that in your product, but that would be surprising to me. I've seen lots of things let you drag and drop mailboxes around to define a custom sort order, but when you have a list of like identities, generally they're just sorted alphabetically or whatever by a client. So if you're not going to support that seems adding.
I guess maybe the like the client could want to have as a default identity something that is not alphabetically sorted, you know, or
sure. So specifying default is fine, but that would just be like we were discussing with the calendar stuff, like a single property, as opposed to a sort order means that every single identity you have has some, ordering that's strictly defined, and that starts to get quite complex. I think probably more than it's warranted.
That's fair. Okay.
Cool.
And yeah, DKG, go ahead.
Hi there. Just wanted to plus one the last two folks and sort of synthesize them a little bit. There are potentials for multiple types of defaults, right? Like a default for a particular reply, I think was mentioned before, but there's other, like I might want a different default when I'm replying to a particular person. I mean, it starts to get a little bit fiddly, and I'm not saying that you want to specify all of these things, but really what you want is default and non-default in a given context. And so I think you could say, here's the generic context. If you don't know what context you're in, here's the default. Specify that here. It's just a flag. And then that leaves room for somebody to say, oh, I want to make a default for some other context. They can figure out how to specify that in a separate document. Thanks for doing this work.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting as well. Having just a flag for the default, and I guess for just maybe sorting it, like Neil said, could just be by alphabetical order for the rest. Or okay.
Yeah, FastMail certainly has more complex ability to say if you're in a particular folder to use particular identities, or replying to particular people to select the identity that matches the address that you was sent to. So if you're replying from a particular to something that was sent to a particular address, it goes back to there. Neil.
Yeah, I was just going to briefly say the reason I believe we didn't specify this in JMAP Mail was because it can get complex, and different clients quite reasonably might want to do different behaviors, and so it was hard to specify something that kind of would be universally intractable. Force people to.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. Yeah, it can be like different ways someone would use the identities, but I think maybe just at least a flag saying like this is a default one, like something simple. And then if you want to do something more complex, maybe an extension. I don't know. Or I mean, we can.
I think it would have to be an extension anyway. Like you can't. I don't think we can add this property as an errata. It's not a.
Okay.
Additional spec.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We can discuss more on the mailing list after. Yeah, Jim. Sorry.
That's okay. And I didn't catch whether this was mentioned or not, but a very common case is in the same organization, in the same domain, or outside, where inside you might have, an extension number listed, and outside you might have a full phone number or something of that sort.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So what action are we looking at here? Do we take this to the mailing list to discuss what to do? Sure.
I mean, we can. I think we can take it to the mailing list. Joris, you want?
Sorry, I just wanted
Please.
to mention one thing for user. As it is right now in JMAP, you could just come up with your own extension, right? Your own capability, and then yeah, do that. But yeah, of course, if there's interest, that makes a lot. I think it makes sense to discuss it in the IETF context to come up with a well-defined thing. Yeah. Just wanted to mention that possibility in case some people don't know that.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to start the discussion on the mailing list then, Renee?
Okay. Yeah. I will maybe send something tomorrow.
Cool.
On this.
I'll put an action in a minute for you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. If no other questions, then I leave the seat to the next.
Cool. All right. Okay. Next on our agenda, I believe, is JMAP for tasks. You can come up to the front microphone if you like. You can see the nice screen.
Oh yeah,
and
much
block
nicer.
people from seeing the other one. We're doing great here. Yeah.
But the microphone is in here. Oh, like this? Yeah.
You
Okay.
can probably pick the microphone and move it slightly too. Hey.
Okay. So tasks, yeah. Version 5 is the current version. So next slide, please. I'm Joris Baum from Odriga, by the way. So yeah, as a reminder, like every time, the idea here for tasks is to make it a common standard, not only for groupware systems focused on mail, but also for Kanban boards or issue trackers. This is one of the core things we're working on. But of course, we also want to include groupware. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what's new in the newest version? As I said before, I tagged along with most changes in calendars. Then worked in some feedback from the last IETF. One of them was that estimated work should only mention a direction and not, I don't know, what did I have, a Fibonacci scale or something? So now it's only defined larger means more work for the estimated work property, which is a property of a task. Another thing that was mentioned at last IETF was that there are now the task spec now has a bunch of new extensions defined or capabilities defined. That's breaks it, or that's a bit different from in this respect. It's a bit different from JMAP calendar. So we have a bunch of groups for use cases that are using a common feature set. And basically, the idea is that implementers can then choose which group they want to implement. And last IETF, it came up that there was some clarification needed. So now the text also includes it or mentions that in case a capability, what happens when a client is using an unsupported capability, then the server should throw an unknown capability error. So it's just as it's defined in the JMAP core spec already. It's just mentioned again in this spec. Yeah, and what happens if a client uses extensions that the server doesn't understand? In this case, the server should store those properties and just ignore them. That's how I extended the spec, or that's I clarified that in the spec. Okay, next slide, please. So one thing I want to discuss about today is what could be new in JMAP for Tasks version 6. Here you can see a task from Trello, and it contains actually 2 checklists that are inside this task. One checklist is called Keep in Mind, and then you see 2 checklist items that are not done yet. And the other one is another checklist with 2 other checklist items here. So there are actually systems where you can have this as a feature and actually widely used systems. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it would be nice to have that also in JMAP tasks. We see that in Google Workspace, Microsoft To Do, Planner, Factro, ClickUp. A lot of systems use checklists. Not a lot of use multiple named checklists assigned to a single task. So as I have the observed features in those systems. For now, I only found that feature within Trello, but Trello is an important server. Most systems have a title for checklists, or that's actually a checklist item that has a title. Or all checklist items have a title actually, so all checklist items have a simple done or not done state. There's a position, last modified stamp that's only visible in the UI usually, and an assignee is also sometimes used. So we have a bunch of features for this functionality that are very common, or not so common, but still important. Next slide, please. So the question here is how to actually support that. Here is an example how to do that in iCalendar somehow. This is from feedback that we got from one of the task system vendors. So on the left side, we see the first vCalendar item, which is basically a checklist that is in relation to another task. Oh, sorry, it's not a V event. That's my mistake. It's a V to do. That's in relation to another to do item, which is a checklist item. So what you can use in iCalendar right now is to have related to basically, and then you have the checklist as a special kind of task that is actually a folder that's related to much simpler tasks in a parent-child relationship. Okay, the question is, can we do better than, well, and also there's this X-type thing that also defines, is it a checklist or not? So the question is, can we do better than that? And basically the idea here is to find out how do we do that in JMAP tasks, if you have some opinions on that. So next slide, please. So my first proposal is to, since checklists are so simple, basically, and check items are also very simple, we could just have a tasks on the right-hand side. And we could just say a task can also contain one or more checklists, basically, which is an own object. And this checklist can then contain own objects on its own, which are check items. And so both of them are very simple objects, and the task can have those inside the checklist property, basically. First suggestion, so you can see there's a task, has a checklist with the title, this is a checklist, and has one check item with this is an item on the checklist. Next slide, please. I have another proposal.
Sorry, there we go.
Yeah, so this is basically to model it somehow like iCalendar already. It's somehow already possible with an iCalendar. Just use the related to field, and in this case, I added a new relation type, which is like a checklist child or a checklist parent or a check item parent, check item child to the relation. So on the left-hand side, you see a task. In the middle, you see a checklist. And on the right-hand side, you can see a checklist item. Yeah, so that's basically the second proposal. Yeah, there's also an alternative that you could add another add type maybe as well. So it's not just a simple task then, it's the whole task object then gets a checklist object as a type, or a checklist item object as a type. Just, yeah, but I'm not sure about this idea. Just put it on there. So next slide, please. Now the question, do you have any preference between those two things? I hope you were able to follow. If not, okay.
So I haven't, Robert Stepanek, I haven't given much thought on which of either I would prefer because I haven't thought through the use case fully yet. But for this example with the list, I wonder, like, if it's already a list, why is there a sort order property? And is the list, rather than this idiom that we typically use in JMAP, like a map of ID to something, was that on purpose not chosen here?
Well, I don't know. I think it's a bit simpler if it's just a simple list.
So there can be good reasons why to use a list here. I just wanted to understand if that was a deliberate choice. Using this key value idiom that we use allows for simpler patching, basically. So like removing or adding stuff, because you don't have to send the full list again.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
But if you want to preserve the order, then in the list, then I would think the sort order property wouldn't be of use anymore, right? So
yeah.
But as I said, in terms of preference, the second proposal looked more familiar to me in terms of how other types are specified in JMAP objects. But as I said, there can be very well reasons to do it like this.
Okay, that's nice feedback. Thank you very much.
So Jim Fenton as participant, less about the representation of multiple checklists, but more about how they're going to be handled. If I understood the introduction properly, there are some clients that support multiple checklists and others that do not.
I was talking mainly about the server software. Didn't try to use clients with a Trello, right? So
right, but
yeah, they have an API as well. Yeah, so yeah.
But we need to consider in terms of the server capabilities. Need to consider what the clients can render.
Yes,
and
definitely.
So if you have a client that does not support multiple checklists,
yeah,
do we have a way of determining the client capabilities and somehow handling that, or do like the second and subsequent checklists just disappear, or what? I mean, that would seem to be bad. It would be better if you could even take the multiple checklists and merge them together somehow for representation. If the client doesn't have that capability, you don't want to just lose the other checklists, I suspect.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that I would say that's up to the client how to handle that. And yeah, so
yeah, I'm not clear on whether that's a client responsibility or a server response. You know, you could kind of think of it as an interoperability capability to interoperate between clients that do and do not support multiple checklists.
I think the question here is how fine-grained we want this capability mechanism. But okay, what we could do maybe is have like a flag at the capability to say, oh, I'm a server and I'm using multiple checklists, by the way. So please make sure you handle this somehow. This is what I can imagine here in this scenario. And then the client sees that flag and then says, okay.
Or does the client have advertise its capabilities, and if it doesn't say that it supports multiple checklists, then we do something magical in terms of not trying to force that on them.
Yeah, it's also possible, but I think within what's defined in JMAP right now, would be easier the other way around, I would say. Yeah. But yeah, it's a valid point, definitely.
Robert Stepanek again. The other thing I was wondering about are the assignee and is complete properties in your proposals. So what's the difference between an assignee
Yeah.
and a participant that already is defined for task?
It's just, yeah, that's the thing. Like a checklist item would then be much simpler, right? So I try to keep it as simple as possible in this checklist item, to not pull in the whole complexity of big blown task, basically. So yeah, well, it's just much simpler. The assignee is just a user ID. Actually, it needs to be a participant then, right? Yeah, you're right. It's a, yeah. Anyway, the goal is to make it much simpler. It's not perfectly written down yet. I didn't put it in the spec yet. Yeah, try to gather some feedback on how I approach this. So on the left-hand side, I'm not sure if I actually explained that well. The task, the checklist item, it's each a full-blown task, basically. The big difference is the relation between them. And on the right-hand side, the checklist item is much simpler. It's not a full-blown task. You cannot do all the things with it that you can do with a task. And typically that's how it's implemented, and you don't want all the features of a normal task in a checklist. Yeah, that's one of the main differences here. Right-hand side, much simpler. Left-hand side, full complexity. So that's why the assignee also is different, and the is complete is also different. It's just a Boolean. It's not a progress.
Yeah. So I'm biased. Obviously, I would think that the left-hand side, so using a full-blown task, would allow for all of that you want to achieve with checklist minus the simplicity or ease of implementation. But probably there is a middle ground where one can define what parts of the scheduling of a task must be implemented for to achieve checklists, for example. So maybe one could still use the already defined scheduling properties and just not require applications to implement all of scheduling, if I understand that this might be too much for some applications.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you already implement scheduling for normal tasks, then you should not be far away from using it for check items as well.
That's my thought.
But yeah, there's a capability that you can say, I have the scheduling, I support scheduling, or I don't. That's already in the task spec.
Yeah, I understood that you might want to support checklists with assignees for applications that do not implement scheduling, but still would like to assign checklist tasks to someone.
For example, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
This is Hans-Jörg. To Jim's question. I think actually the Trello case with a multiple checklist seems to be, like Joris said, a little bit of a particular special case within those supporting checklists at all. I'd probably personally not over-engineer it here in that extent, so I don't think we necessarily need to have a capability or something like that in the standard. I think what you need to consider a little bit, we are typically coming as Rodrigo from the portability side, so we see this also as from the data format as an exchange format that you can use to import-export data from different systems. So interoperability between different systems is obviously something you can also later on then use with that, what is actually where JMAP is initially coming from. So we sometimes might have a slightly different perspective where we think about. I would then see this as an issue for the client. So if you are a client supporting checklists and the spec states there can be two checklists, either you extend your product or you write a message to the user how it works, I would say. I mean, this is then maybe a little inconvenient. What would happen in our portability case typically is, we are even a third party usually in the middle. So we have that very often that we migrate from systems that support whatever infinite number of phone numbers, whereas many systems only support 3 of them or something like that. And then we do something like you suggested, we merge it together or something like that. So, but this is nothing that strictly, I think, needs to be within a spec. It's up to the import-export mechanism at stage. Okay, that was to Jim. To that slide, Joris, just one or two short comments. So first of all, I think it's necessary to have definitely a checklist type in a way, because otherwise client might be tempted to add properties for tasks which are not actually for checklist tasks dedicated. Sorry. And with respect to if to reference it or if to group it within one item, probably not a strong opinion, but the problem I see with references sometimes is that in order to put it together as a client, you need to have more or less the full list from the server in order to make sure you have all the items returned and find your references within it. So that's a similar thing sometimes in calendaring when you have modified events and so on in the stream of all instances. So that's sometimes a little bit tedious from a client side. I'm not sure if the JMAP batch API would support, for instance, currently to retrieve something like a task and its related items. That would be an interesting question to people that know more about the nested JMAP stuff here.
I guess I'm
Thank you.
next on this list. So yeah, what we've done for similar types of things, and I think this came up in JS Contact for names as well. If you don't know what all the different parts are, there's still an array of items kind of in order, and each of them's defined as what they are. The idea of, again, having, if you have multiple checklists in a single document, having them as a single list of check items with a grouping information with them allows a client that doesn't understand about them to still see it just as one big checklist with all the items in it from all the different checklists. And then if that client adds a new item, it appears without a grouping because it gets added without that grouping parent ID as part of it. But they can patch an item, so mark something as checked without affecting the representation for clients that are more capable, because you're just patching that one item. I think that's a good reason to use the object and ID rather than the full list, is that you can then patch an individual. You can say, I'm checking this box, but I don't want to change anything else about the representation because I don't know what everything else means. I think that's a good design pattern to use.
Yeah. So you're referring to the right-hand side, right? The check item as an
more generically to the style of API, yes.
Right. So no big preference on either solutions. No. Right. Okay. Just to double check. Thank you. There's still one. Right, Hans-Jörg?
Sorry, no.
All right. Thanks for all the feed.
Daryl Miller, go ahead.
I snuck in one extra data point for supporting the multiple checklists, because initially I was like, why would you need that? But GitHub issues would allow you to create multiple checklists within a single issue, which maps to the task and list of checklists.
Thanks a lot. All right. Thanks for all the feedback. Next slide. I forgot what.
Hey, it's been a while.
Future work. Yeah, right. So I didn't yet touch the task list. Still need to refine that. That's the future work. Also, the iCalendar task spec brings a grouping mechanism that might be beneficial for the JMAP task spec as well. Still wanted to keep track how, I didn't want to redefine it and look how it, so I'm kind of waiting for it to settle here. Also, comments are still one major thing I want to add, and gather more feedback and gather more information on existing systems. So still a bunch of work to do is what this slide is basically wants to say. Thanks.
Cool. What's the next? That's all. What's the next action that's going to happen here?
Basically work on the future tasks, I would say, the future work. See how far I get, I would say.
Cool. I guess we'll come back to this when we get to the milestones section to see where you're expecting to move on to. Thank you. Anything else on this before we move on to the next section? Last comments on tasks? Cool. Let's go back to the chair slides and see if we've got anything else.
I still have my. It's the migration thing is still.
Yep. So the migration thing, and there was S-MIME sender. Is there anything new on that, Alexi? S-MIME sender extensions for JMAP. No, cool. All right, then let's do the other thing. Let me share the slides.
So how are we on time? Not so good, right?
We're fine.
Okay, perfect.
We've got
So don't need to hurry.
left in this section.
Yes, so last IETF, we already teased JMAP for migration and data portability. We don't have a draft just yet. I just wanted to give you a short update that we're still on it. We want to make a draft, and here are some things that we think about including in the draft, and you might have some feedback on that. Next slide, please. Yeah. So again, from last time, basically, what is the motivation? Why are we doing this? We basically want to, our business or our use case is moving existing user data between systems over a generic API. This is actually what we're looking for. So yeah, we found JMAP, which is really nice for that. What would we also want to do? We would like to give an API spec to developers of legacy systems, which currently don't have a appropriate API for doing exactly that. Yeah, and also we have ran into some migration and portability related problems here and there and wanted to provide some guidance in general on all those three things. So what should the spec provide that we still don't have yet? Guidance on how to develop a JMAP API in a very simple way. So we want to have low requirements here. We want to have propose a reduced JMAP feature set, like the minimum that implementers need to do, and also some further extensions for migration-related problems. Next slide, please. Yeah, so first of all, we call it the central profile for rapid development, basically. The idea is, how do you quick start JMAP API development? So we want to define a bare minimum for like one-time use, actually. So it's a bit weird word or a bit weird wording. So our use case, sometimes people have a legacy system and they just want to migrate the data away once, and then they want to shut down the system. So for this, they need something really simple, really easy to implement. And we want to give some guidance on basics to start with, so people will more easily be able to dive into the JMAP world and then extend upon this bare minimum. Yeah, so rough outline is here, as I already had it last time. Basically, only focus on key objects, skip a session object in case a username equals the account. Introduce a simplified request, as already teased last time, and also no batching. Yeah, for now, like, as a first step, basically. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so again, here's a simplified request from last time. Last time there was a suggestion from Braun to have more like a path-based approach. For now, I would not go that route because it would add another requirement for people to implement, which would be like a routing mechanism. When we just use queries and a URI, it should be even simpler to implement. All right, next slide, please. Yes, and there's one of the extensions that we think are also good in this informational draft, which is JMAP debug is what we call it. So basically, we already have like documentation about this extension on our own website. So the problem we ran into, we have an API software is running, so the JMAP API software is running, that you write yourself, is running on a third-party infrastructure, but the log messages from this third-party infrastructure cannot be sent to a logging service that you can use yourself. So, but what you can do, you have already a client that has access to the JMAP API. So how do you get access to the logs or to more information to see what's happening on the server side? You can just send logs alongside the response to your JMAP client, and then read those.
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi dropped off for some reason, so I guess
All right.
Mitoko has just logged me out.
Want me to do it?
Yeah.
I'm
So
reconnecting now.
no worries. I can just.
It's pretty impressive that it drops the slides. I guess that makes sense.
It's no worry. So it's basically, the idea is basically to send logs.
Oh, no, okay.
To send logs alongside the JMAP response. No, that's yeah. So yes, so there might be some other use cases. So here you can see how we currently implement it. It's like an initial start. So we have actually log lines here in the response, and you see files, like a file, log level, which log line, message, and so on. As you can imagine, it's like, need to take care that this is like a secure channel with restricted access because it's logs, it's sensitive information. And yeah, it's for now, it's just our own extension, but we want to include this, like a more generic, a better version in this migration draft. And there might be other use cases, for example, in the Sieve case. You could also say the runtime errors that were an issue with the Sieve draft. You could also expose them via as log lines, maybe within the JMAP response, maybe. Yeah. Okay, so next slide, please.
Where am I even? Here. Yep. Gotcha.
Yes. So backend info is basically to what Hans-Jörg was saying before. So we have the issue as a client supporting a lot of servers that no server software is perfect, even though they say they implement the same thing. They have their own quirks, and we want to be able to handle that in an automated fashion. So we need to identify which server is what. I don't know, is it version 2? Is it version 2.1? Things like that. And so basically to be able to handle also like small bugs in server-side software that people will not fix themselves. Yeah, so what do we need to do before we can do that? We need to get information what software is actually running on those servers. Without that info, we cannot do that. Next slide, please. So here's a proposal, basically, how to do that within the session object. One could just, after login, a server could just expose which backend, which software basically is running on it, or which software versions it's using. So, for example, we have PHP, we have Horde versions here, or then we also have the Sieve script type. This is just a very rough first idea we want to include in this draft. And I think the main question I have is, does it make sense to compile everything in this initial draft? I probably, as a first iteration, yes, I would say. If you have some feedback on that, feel free. If not, yeah, I'm also fine. So, thank you.
Yeah, this is Hans-Jörg. I have just one clarification for explanation, I think, how this came into place during the discussion in IETF115. So the motivation behind this, or what we are doing here mainly, is we consider JMAP a very good choice to wrap an existing legacy data store. And we see that probably other people want to do that as well. So we see very often customers coming to us with some dump of emails somewhere, some maildir folder, something like that. And we are increasingly considering JMAP or a list of CIF files stored there, and we are increasingly seeing JMAP as a very good option to lift those on an HTTP level for migration purposes. And so that is basically the background of all these proposals here. That for people that have a similar use case, are in a similar situation, that might find that also very useful. Obviously, like Ken already discussed, this is not necessarily for public exposure of a JMAP service to normal customers, but for restricted usage in a very specific scenario. Yeah.
Cool. What do we want to do with this, I guess, is the next question.
Create a draft.
Cool. Excellent. We'll add an action point for that too. I think that's the end of the JMAP stuff. So let's do the JMAP milestone work now, just so that we can then move on to extra without having to come back. Do we have any other business for JMAP while we're waiting around here? I guess not. Here are the milestones. Done, 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 done. Submit JMAP quotas document to IESG. That is done. Submit document for blobs to IESG is done. Submit CIV document to IESG is not done. And we will do that in hopefully December this year. Submit SMIME sender extensions document to IESG. Alexi.
Like it in March, and I'll try to be good.
Cool, that would be great. There's a bunch of interest in SMIME out in the world at the moment. A lot of the big companies are planning to do stuff with encrypted email. There was some discussion at Morg about that, and they seem to be standardizing on SMIME. So we might see it becoming a lot more popular.
We've got things like dance for key distribution as well.
Yeah. A document defining JMAP access to address books. We don't yet have a document for this.
Oh, sorry, Joe's bomb. Isn't there JMAP contacts? Isn't that the
So there's JS contact. Is there JMAP
for contacts
as well?
I think Neil
Is that-
posted it in the mailing list.
Okay, let me see if we actually have that in there yet. Maybe I've been paying so little attention to my own working group, I don't even know what documents we have. Neil. So it is.
Oh, yeah. Writing slides for that.
Yeah. Resolved. Done. Haha, informational document. Let's kick that can down the road to, along with all the other fun stuff. Submit JMAP calendars document to IESG. We're thinking is going to be happening along with everything else July next year. JMAP sharing document we're going to do. Do you think we'll have that ready for next month, Neil?
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe. All right, let's say yes. JMAP tasks is currently February 2023. Do we think that's realistic? July as well. Cool. All right, and then we have, I think, some extra milestones to add to this. Adopt a draft for migration. Endpoint, something like that. Next month, early next year. Early next year. Because you have to write it and then we have to call for adoption. That seems reasonable. What else do we have in our list here? Tasks is a thing that's got stuff already. Identities. We're going to start discussion on mailing lists. I guess we can add a milestone for that when we decide to do something. Quotas, sharing, they're all things we already have milestones for. Calendars we have milestones for, I think. Good. Then I think maybe that's everything. Any other milestone things people want to add? No. Review changes. Looks good. Yeah, okay, I'll just delete that one. I know I can't have that. Review changes again. And save. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of the JMAP section. Let's start the extra section. Do we want to switch chairs or just hang out where you are? You two both look happy. All right, rolling into the extra. Now, I think we only have a couple of sets of slides for this. So let's just go back and have a look at, go away, deep thing, at the chair slides and see what was on our agenda for extra. All right, I'm at partial is with ISG. I think there's nothing, Alexi, on these two documents.
Yeah, so there was some minor comments from Murray, and I believe I addressed them in my copy and
Cool.
replied the editorial, so I think that's fine.
So next step is for Alexi to publish.
When the last
revision.
call finishes, then I'll, and there was, no, that's the other one, never mind.
It should be finishing kind of now, I think.
19.
Yeah,
Okay.
next week. Cool. All right. And the other thing was Civ Action Registry.
That's the one I was talking about an hour ago when I was confused.
Yep. What did you say then again? I didn't copy the notes down.
I just replied to Murray's, he asked about the one column in the table. Again, kind of editorial thing, but we'll need to decide how to handle this. I think his comments are non-controversial.
Cool. So again, you should publish changes.
That one ends on the 23rd.
Cool. Easy.
Yeah, I think I got Gen Art review on it with no comments, so that was good.
Yep. All right. So next thing on here is message limit. You again, Alexi.
Right.
Let me share your slides.
Do you want me to be on the front?
Sure, coming up.
So next slide. So yeah, I think the history of this is basically Bron started last call in July or August. Barry had a look and said, oh, there is a bunch of comments that you haven't addressed. I said, okay, partial seems to be done. Let me split it off. And this is the other part of it, which still have open issues we'll need to discuss. So yeah, basically the idea here is message limit is a way for mail stores that have limitations on how many messages can be handled at any given time for performance or workload reasons to be able to express this restriction. So next slide, please. So one of the main things that we still need to discuss is the issue with message limit changing requirements on copy in particular, and UID copy, saying that the base spec says that copy and UID copy are atomic. So either all messages are copied or they'll fail to copy. And message limit deliberately was saying that, well, you ask to copy 10,000 messages and the message limit is 1,000. You will only copy 1,000 and then kind of give a partial error. So because the requirement on copy and UID copy is the base spec, basically, for the client to support this, client needs to opt in. And I think the mechanism for the client to opt in is to use enable. Yeah. I think there is quite a big desire to be able to do this without client opting in, but if we can find another way. And probably next slide would be better. Next slide.
Yep.
Right. So basically, previous version of the document was saying that the top example is what's going to happen. So the copy command still succeeds, and there is untagged no with message limit saying that some messages weren't copied. And this is what will happen now if enable message limit is issued. If enable message limit is not issued, then the second case should happen is UID copy fails with no, and you get message limit response code. So what I really struggle with, and I keep kind of flipping back and forth on this, is this extension is very useful for the servers because servers have this restriction. What's the motivation for the client to opt in? And I don't have a good answer to this.
Yeah.
Because the difficulty is that if copy is non-atomic and the client supports this extension, then the client can, it has to do more work, basically. It does copy 10,000 messages, get a partial response. It's nice. Okay, so I need to remove these 1,000 messages that got copied and keep repeating the command until it succeeds eventually. Obviously, it's more complicated code, more difficult to debug, and all the rest.
What's the actual benefit for the server?
Right. This is Barry Lee, but that was why I got into the queue. A client that wants to copy 10,000 messages when the message limit is 1,000 is just going to do it with 10 copy commands. So where does the server win on this? You've wound up making the client more complicated, and the server does not ultimately have to do any less work in the process. So I don't understand the benefit of this.
Maybe Vikram, he should be in the call, will reply to this. I think copying might be a kind of outlier, and maybe we decide to do something else with it. The more useful cases might be fetch and search.
Yeah, absolutely, that's
fine.
That I get. But fetch and search don't have this problem of atomicity, which is making everything more complicated. So if we just say it only applies to fetch and search, then I think we're all good. And,
but interesting.
We have,
this is Vikram here. I just wanted to add a couple of comments. I mean, primarily we do need this on fetch and search, but we also see problems on copy. So the problem happens is clients most of the time don't understand that they have like large set of messages. They give this 1 colon star always, and that ends up creating timeouts on the server. Okay.
I'm sorry, I did not follow that. Just
so
let's
say, so usually the clients, some of the clients that we have are really, I should not say that, but it's dumb. they end up saying, okay, let me copy over this 20,000 messages. But copying over 20,000 messages takes a long time for us.
Sure.
Okay.
And then it times
we
out.
do fail in the middle of the copy, and that is not really good for the clients.
So you want the client to have to do that using 10 copy commands
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
exactly.
they happen in smaller
Right.
batches. I get, okay,
Right.
I get it. I get it.
So can I actually, if we just want to solve the copy timing out, there are other mechanisms.
Right.
We can send untagged response in the middle of copy. And actually, I know that some servers do it within a minute to make sure that the client doesn't time out. Cyrus server does that. So if we just want to address this, that is fixable in a different way.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
We were primarily interested in fetch and search. Copy was, we can live with,
Yeah, if we don't
timing.
make copy, sorry, yeah, Barry, if we don't do this bit to copy and we just make on the fetch, that's a lot safer.
Yes. And what I'm thinking of that we might do with copy is have it sort of a checkpointable. It might be part of this. It could be a separate document, but where the server just sends a checkpoint every 1,000 messages or something that says these were copied okay, these were copied okay. So the client doesn't have to retry it. But if there's a problem and it crashes in the middle, the client knows some of the messages were successfully copied. So we can have that kind of thing that doesn't require the client to go keep sending command after command, but lets it be recoverable.
Okay,
so if we wanted to work on something like
so
that.
the proposal is not to break copy command atomicity and invent a different mechanism just to report the partial status.
Yeah, we might think about that. And so then this would only apply to fetch and search, and we'd come up with a different solution for copy.
But
might be workable.
Okay.
Anyway, that's so I've said what I need.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Ken. I want to clarify, we are still going to allow a server to return no message limit on a copy if it's too large for the server to handle, correct? I know we're not going to do the client side weirdness where we can do part of the copy, but the server can still say, I'm not doing this because you've asked for too many copies and return this code,
Okay,
correct?
I think we are going back to the second option. UID copy will fail with no message limit, copying nothing.
Correct.
So the atomicity promise is not violated, and it's much quicker to abort the, yes.
I just wanted to clarify that the response code will still apply to copy.
Yes. I think for consistency, it has to, right?
And then it's just that the client would have to figure out how to get around it. Yeah.
Okay.
And we will think about an alternative for copy that works out better for Vikram's.
Right. And in theory, we can probably take out the enable message limit because it's no needed if we go this way.
Okay. So what we are saying is we are just going to, the copy will either fail or succeed.
Copy will fail
right
with message limit. So the UID copy, no message limit. So it will always fail and it will fail quickly. And the client will need to do in smaller chunks if it wants to work.
It'll be up to the client to send smaller copies, which if they're using UIDs may be a little harder for them to figure out the range, the size of the range, but it shouldn't be a big deal.
Hold on.
No, client should be able to figure out for the UID ranges is what we think, because client should already have all the UIDs downloaded, so they should know the range when they are asking for it.
Well, not necessarily. The client may not have fetched all of it. So the client knows how many message IDs there are, but it doesn't know the UID ranges necessarily. Most of them do, but they don't have to. But that's okay. I mean, the client will just have to be able to figure that out. That's all.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So hold on. I'm just trying to make sure that we covered all the bases. Basically, unextended client will be unable to copy large message sets.
Right.
And that's annoying, but it's kind of a safer behavior anyway. You okay with that?
Yeah, we are okay. Yeah, we can make that
All right.
change. We don't need to be partial. It's easier for us as well.
And then independently, we can also do the thing that but that actually can be a separate thing anyway, because it can be used without message limit.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, more drafts, Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. I think this was useful.
Is that the?
There are actually a few more things that I discovered. Okay, well, we kind of covered this. Next slide, please. After that.
After this one?
Yeah, I already said that. Yeah,
okay.
Keep saying. Well, this is something, strictly speaking, we don't need to do this, but this is kind of cute. Maybe. And guess what? I found this keyword, actually search criteria in IMAP version 3. So somebody already thought of this, years ago. Next slide.
Well,
there is example. Okay. It might be a bit obscure, but basically, at the moment, if there is no UID before, UID after, what you need to do is, let's say you want to, find a message based on criteria and then do a page from it, either to the bottom of a mailbox or to the top. You have to do this by doing a search, getting the UID back from the server as a number, then constructing another search. Obviously, you cannot pipeline it. With this, you can actually pipeline the two searches command. You say, first you get the, whatever you're searching for, you find your message. Using the save option, you say that $ becomes this message that you found. And then you can say, well, I want all the UIDs from the beginning of mailbox up to this one. But actually, because you say partial, you only say, I only want 50 of these. So it's kind of a, slightly funny way of doing the range. Do we want to do this?
Yeah, the do we want is the question.
I probably can construct an easy example than this,
right. It looks clever.
Yeah.
Is anybody really going to implement this and care about it?
So
that's really the question.
All right. What happened, I'm writing webmail server, and actually the way we do it is sometimes I find actually the lowest message, which is non-deleted, non-junk. I get UID of it, and then I get a page from it. That would be an easier way of doing this. Again, it's kind of cute, can be a separate extension. What do people think?
I don't object to it if there are clients who are going to want to implement it, but that's the question. Are we going to just write this up because it's cool and then no clients are going to bother with it? In which case, I would say we shouldn't waste our time. So.
Okay, how about I'll play with this, and if I find that it's useful with my server and the client, then I will write it up. But
cool.
At the moment, not as a part of this document, so maybe it will be a separate one.
Cool.
Next slide. Oh yes. The wonders of IMAP. There are so many extensions. There are always so many interactions between them. So as it happened, actually, I just realized, after writing this example, I realized message limit and search res or IMAP4F2 have an interaction. Because what's the way message limit is written at the moment if you do a search and include partial, but the range is bigger than the message limit, the search will succeed. Actually, I'm missing some results, returning. But it will return message limit response code. I think basically, I would like to say that the save option in this case interact with message limit by truncating the result to the message limit, to make it clear. Again, if you're only implementing message limit and not search res, then you don't care, or vice versa.
Yeah, it seems to me that you save what you found. So if you return a partial thing, you save the partial thing that you returned.
Right, and if you fail this the search, then you don't save anything. So it's very consistent with how search res was written. So
yeah.
Okay, next. So obviously the last thing I just talked about needs to be fixed in the spec. Are people interested in implementing? Well, I know that Yahoo has an implementation, but I might play with the client side as well. But it kind of would be interesting to know if.
Sure.
Do you get the client side, or you want to do the server side? Will it have a use for this, or is it again like kind of performance thing?
Yeah.
This is Ken. We could certainly implement it in the Cyrus server. I don't think we'd be using it as Fastmail, at least not in the short term, unless some client comes along that's just bombarding us with huge requests.
So in Cyrus, it's just going to be an option that you enable, and then you say message limit.
Yeah, it'd be an admin configurable option that says, we're going to only limit it to 1,000 or 10,000 or what have you. And
yeah, if you can do it reasonably soon and provide some feedback whether you find anything wrong with the spec, that would be great.
I think I'm going to have a fairly light load between Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I can probably throw it in there. Just make sure you ping me and remind me.
Okay. Is your boss agreeing to this?
Yeah, sure. I'm
So,
not his boss, I'm his boss's boss.
What happens when you live in Buffalo?
I've got 8 hours on the plane back. I'm able to do it then.
okay. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So action is for Alexei, I guess, next, do another revision, then wait for implementations?
Yes. So I think I suggested to Vikram that we do some interop testing in early December.
Yeah, we already scheduled one. So.
Yeah. So, and I think some other companies will have client-side implementations, right?
Correct.
If you want to announce it more widely, you can, but or not, or later. We'll figure it out.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Back on chair slides again. I think we should at least briefly talk through Civ snooze and Civ process IMAP.
I will address process IMAP first because I don't think there's any outstanding issues. We've got running code in production. I think at least functionally it does what we want it to do. So I'm ready to go to last call on that unless there's differing opinions in the room. As far as Civ snooze goes, I don't see Pete in the room, but he had an issue with a presentation my colleague Rick did about implementing snooze via IMAP in regards to having a special purpose mailbox. And that is kind of what Civ snooze is doing. And I asked Pete to review that document. I don't know if he has, and if he has, I haven't heard back. So I will bother him and email Core about that and see where we stand. That's all I have on those, unless there's questions on either of those two drafts.
All right, thank you. I've got an action to do the last call for process IMAP. The last thing that we had on the agenda is from me, which is the JMAP upgrade path. So I have created some slides for this. And I'm just going to do it from here. So basically the problem here is that there's millions of existing IMAP clients out there which connect to IMAP servers and people are accessing their email through them. We would love them to upgrade to JMAP and we would not love them to have to re-credential, re-authenticate, re-fiddle with their settings, ideally. Also, for quite a while, probably, people will have these clients connecting to servers that may support both IMAP and JMAP and may want to add new features by making a JMAP call to access a new feature without replacing their existing IMAP synchronization code, which is working perfectly and beautifully and has 0 bugs. To that end, I've been looking at what you would do here if your IMAP server had object ID support and you already knew the IDs for every single email, if there might be some things that you would want to do via JMAP to manipulate those messages while still keeping the synchronization code. And that means you need some way of saying how to access this same mailbox. I'm going to take this thing off via JMAP as well. Another good use case here is that IMAP doesn't have a good way to get changes across your entire set of mailboxes. So you could use JMAP just for the push, connect via JMAP, say, create a push subscription, send me messages about changes to this mailbox. And then if you get a trigger through that saying something's changed, then do an IMAP synchronization rather than having to keep an idle connection open. And obviously the final case is the full upgrade. If you have a server that supports both IMAP and JMAP and you already have an existing IMAP connection to it, you might want to change that to a JMAP connection. I know there are clients that already do that kind of thing with some IMAP servers where they switch from having a password to having an OAuth connection and they ask the server using proprietary methods to say, please convert this password into an OAuth token, and then I'll save that and go ahead with that. So there's a few possibilities for what you could do here. You could have a URI for JMAP that has all the entropy in it already. So rather than having to authenticate against it at all, it's just a secret URI. You could require OAuth for the IMAP and just say use the same token via JMAP as well. Or you could have the connection return both the URI and a token and say connect this URI using this token and do JMAP with that. And then there's a question of whether you need to pop up a consent screen and have some, will you allow this client to connect using the same way that you do with any other OAuth connection, because it may actually appear as a connected device in the UI of your server, depending how it stores things. So is there any confusion there? That's kind of an unanswered question at this point for that. Barry.
Just what's the benefit of, basically the URI is a bearer token.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit of having 2 bearer tokens?
If you don't give a special URI per user and you just send people to the regular JMAP URI and give them a token instead. There's some examples.
Well, that's 2, right? What is number 3?
So, number 3 is like number 2, but instead of saying that you have to use OAuth via IMAP with a bearer token that you're using for the IMAP connection, use that same token. Instead, in number 3, you return a token and say, use this one, which may be the same token or it may be something generated specifically if you have a password connection. Number 3 is certainly the most flexible of the token-based one, and number 1 is the easiest because you're creating a URI with a token in it. Then the client needs no smarts at all. Just go here and make a call. All right, so one possibility is to separate things out and to say in the IMAP connection or via some other endpoint, I have this username and password, please convert it into an OAuth token for me. So you could just say get OAuth or whatever in your IMAP connection and it returns saying this username, this token, you have an OAuth token. And then I've done some examples for JMAP auth, if that's readable up there. You could say, nope. You could say, yes, here's that example number one. Here's a path with the token in it. Number two, I see I rather than just giving the JMAP URI, I gave both, which, yeah, okay, that's wrong. That should just be /JMAP in that case. And then the third one was just use your same token, please. So those examples are reversed. This is what I get for writing the slides 5 minutes beforehand. Some examples, anyway, different ways this could be done. Do people think this is worthwhile work? Should we do a separate get the OAuth token, or should we return both together? Should it be inbound in IMAP or using some different endpoint? These are big questions. Ken?
This is Ken. I think it's worthwhile. I don't want to do too much bike shedding here. I'm just wondering, is there any reason to not just put the URI in the capabilities post IMAP authentication, as opposed to having a separate command for the client to fetch it?
That is a good question. Certainly, if you need to generate something for it, then it's an expensive thing to create if you don't know if it's wanted or not. If someone's logging in with a username and password, you may be generating an OAuth session for them at the point they request one of these things. You don't want to do one of them for every single IMAP connection.
Hi, this is Hans-Jörg. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. I mean, it rang a bell with me. I mean, I have actually a different use case for that. I mean, of course, I see your use case here, but you know, you have generally the use case when you have a platform migration and people switching, for instance, to another migrated server or something like that. So I wonder a little bit if there is actually a little bit of a bigger picture to this than this very specific IMAP to JMAP use case, and if it's worth thinking about that in more detail.
Do you have any more right now, or is this
Whoa, no, I need to maybe first question is, so what is the goal of this? So I guess, I mean, you made up in the slides a little bit of a bigger picture, but I assume it's rather smaller particular changes to the IMAP protocol like the JMAP OAuth what you suggest as an outcome of this, right?
So the motivation behind this is that there's a bunch of clients now who support IMAP and would like to enable some of the features that are JMAP only, but don't want to replace their entire synchronization stack straight away. So this is a step in that direction, so they can add JMAP support and create the new features using JMAP calls without replacing their entire IMAP stack immediately.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, the general idea here is not so far away from what I was thinking about. Maybe I just need to think about it and come back on a mailing list or so.
Cool.
Alexei Melnikov, couple of random questions, comments. One is IMAP had the referral extension, which has a URI. That was like from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There is a server and there is a mailbox. And if it's a server one, we can just say HTTPS URI is now legal. Go there. So again, I don't know whether it's a good idea or not, but we can have a look. The other thing is, if we are going there, you automatically generate auth token when requested. I'm kind of a bit worried about this because I think it goes against the auth philosophy. Because if there is a user interaction that is needed, what you're saying, you always will get a token or it will fail, and then the user might never see the nice page saying that you're connecting to this branded service and all of the rest. Yeah. So I'm kind of, I'm not entirely sure whether it's in spirit with auth, to be honest.
Yeah, that was my question of whether we needed to pop up the consent screen at the point that you do this. In which case,
you actually, what you're doing is you're implementing just SSL auth And, and if you do, then you will get a token anyway. So why do you need to stick it there in the first place? Unless you maybe want to put some OAuth specific configuration information in IMAP protocol because it's not always available and you want to make it workable with lots of clients. And
that sounds like an argument for having the case that you have to be using OAuth via IMAP already, in which case you can use the same token via JMAP as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hans-Jörg again, migration enthusiast.
Hey, it's a very enthusiastic IETF, isn't it?
Yeah. What Alexei just said, yeah, maybe there is a slight relation to that draft presented in the, I think, HTTP API working group by Benny Derry-Swartz, I think, about OAuth by command line applications.
Non-interactive.
Yeah. Just, I don't know, maybe keep in mind.
Yeah.
And to your further question, like what could this imply on a larger scale? So for instance, what I mean here, you look at the very specific thing now, like getting from a password-based to an OAuth-based auth. Yeah? So the question would be, what if for some reason another provider would change from X to Y authentication scheme? So would it be worth thinking about supporting that in a in a general fashion? And for instance, also in terms of, like, for instance, the provider deciding to shut down the IMAP service or whatever else service. And this is also something that might be communicated so that, for instance, the client then can say to the user, okay, you need to now do that or something like that. And question related to that also, I think I didn't quite understand that from the slides. Is that something the client needs to be, or you envision that the client does do this implicitly on behalf of the user, or is there any, confirmation the user needs to do for this change?
I think that's an open question still, whether the user needs to explicitly opt into this. Ideally, for me, a client that adds, say, snooze as a feature, rather than trying to backport snooze from JMAP into IMAP, they could just say, if I'm going to snooze this message, then I'll make a snooze call with the object ID, email ID that I've fetched via IMAP and say, please snooze this message to the server, and the server will then make the changes to the mailbox, and then the regular synchronization code will notice.
Okay.
So that's how I envision it working, whether the user needs to opt into that, or it's just, this client now supports snooze, your IMAP connection will automatically support it if the server supports it.
The problem I see here, if that is supposed to gain adoption with clients, which is certainly the goal in a certain way, I think there needs to be some clear guidance. On the first or second slide you had, there was quite some different things you proposed, and I'm not sure, for instance, if clients were willing to implement all of these, like, just a tiny bit of JMAP, the full switch to JMAP, or at least that needs to be somehow explained to them in a better way. But yeah, of course, not something for now, maybe.
Yeah, this is kind of, I think we're getting a little bit too far in the weeds. I think the question still stands, do we want to adopt this as work? And I'm still in favor of doing so. It sounds like there's other people in the room that feel the same way.
Anyone want to speak against adopting it, I guess?
Okay, I will carefully word this. I think there is enough interest in the room to investigate this problem. It's, the reason why me and Hans-Jörg are arguing is probably because we're kind of interested in addressing this sort of problem. But I don't think the proposal on the table is cooked enough to be adopted. Is this fair?
Yep.
Oh, hell with it. Too fussy to do the thing. This is Barry. I don't agree with that because I don't think things need to be fully baked to be adopted. I think that the idea is that there's enough here to get us thinking, and then we can use that to develop the document. Everything is still up for grabs.
The whole discussion about OAuth might be you just don't need to do anything. You already, all the mechanism are already there. So it's like kind of pointless.
Sure, and so then it can be removed from the document. You know, if we decide that we want to work on this, it doesn't matter. I'm babbling. Never mind.
Yeah, in which case it just becomes an advice document. Server should specify JMAP is found here somehow. Because there needs to be something that tells you where the JMAP place to connect to is to get the same mailbox.
Okay, let me try to rephrase this. Is there a draft?
No.
Do you have enough information?
Getting there.
Okay.
So I think the
when
next
we
step
write
is
the
for me to
first
put together
draft,
a draft.
we can talk.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was a draft. Okay.
Okay, and I think you certainly alerted me to the interesting problem, so I'll be paying attention now.
Excellent. Anyone else want to work with me on a draft? Cool. All right. We will chat straight after this. I believe we are down to milestones. Any other business for the extra working group before we do that? All right. Let me share my screen. John.
Yeah, John Levine. I just have a question. I have a draft to revivify the expires header for mail messages. And someone this morning asked, does that mean we can have an expires keyword in IMAP so that people can tell, it can ask for the messages that are expired or not? And I said, I don't know, but we have a meeting and I can find out. So assuming that people use this header, which I think is fairly likely because there was a lot of interest in it at MOG, would it be worth adding an expired flag just so you can pick the messages that have expired or not? And if there's some interest, I can write a draft.
Queue is open. Anyone want to comment on this? Yes.
Well, it's complicated. The problem is that
Thanks, Murray.
in the base IMAP, flags are Boolean things. And what you're asking is not Boolean. Or is it?
Yeah, we are.
It is, yeah. I mean, the expires header has a timestamp. So you're basically asking for
Are you trying to make the server annotate the messages that be on the expiry? With a flag, with a Boolean flag.
Like is or isn't expired.
Yeah, it's basically once it's expired, maybe server sent or even client sent, you mark it as expired and then it just stays. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I think that's what I'm asking.
That would be doable, yes. Okay. So if you're asking for something other than the Boolean flag, it depends on other extensions that some implementations might or might not have.
Yeah, the point of the expired header is just like it's either you're past the date or you aren't. It really is just a Boolean.
I think we got to take this to the list.
Cool. Yep. To the list. Excellent. Milestones, very, very quickly. Yes, I don't want to share my screen. No, I've not changed my mind. Let's roll. Allow. It's really quite a faff. Takes 3 or 4 seconds. Documents. Extra. Yeah. Come on, data tracker. You can do it. Edit milestones. Done, 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 done. Adopt a document for EII with Civ and submit a document with EIA are the only things that we have in our milestone list. That seems really not what's going on. Submit message limit. When's that going to happen, Alexi?
What does it say currently?
There isn't one. February?
Yeah.
Data tracker really is going particularly slowly at the moment. This is uncomfortable.
It isn't like you're the only person using it right now.
Well, yeah, but who else is? It's just the end of a session. All right. Other milestones. Ken.
Yeah, I think back in September, I submitted a draft for returning metadata in the list responses. I don't believe I received any feedback, but can we have a call for adoption soonish on that? I think there was interest at 114, so that's why I wrote the draft.
All right, we'll call for adoption for that now, November. There's many things called metadata here. Maybe I should search for like Murchison or something. I'm at list metadata. Done. All right. Anything else? Well, what else we got that's got IMAP in the name that's been proposed and is not? Many things that say IMAP. Okay, that's ridiculous. Let's have a look at our notes and see what we said we're going to do. This session will shut at some point, but that's fine so long as my screen's still. Process IMAP. We don't have a milestone for process IMAP, so submit that to last call is going to be a thing. Where are we? Yeah. Submit. MSG is going to happen in November. Is it one word or two?
IMAP.
That's the one.
Okay.
Got you. Civ snooze to OSG. December, January.
Probably December, depending when Pete has to sign.
Cool. Snooze. Clearly we didn't get around to this last meeting, or there would be additional milestones in there already. Message limit we've got a thing for already. Civ action registry, partial's been submitted already. Migration, we're back in JMAP now. Good. And there's no milestones yet for the is expired stuff or my thing because we don't have anything ready to adopt yet. Cool. Then I think we might be at the end of our milestones list. Fabulous. Review changes. Cool. Anything else? We're well over time. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your IETF. Let's go have some snacks and I'll see you all in email call, no doubt.
Most likely.
Yeah. All right.